afternoon and welcome to the fourth day of the IHE 2021. I realize I'm starting 2 minutes early because for those of you who've been with us over the last 3 days, you know that now it's become a new tradition of sorts, that between sessions, before sessions and after sessions, we have very brief but very valuable health tips. And therefore, we're going to start today also with a 1-minute health tip. And therefore, I'm going to request my team to run that. And as soon as that gets done, we will start formally with the first session of the day. Thank you to Chef Atul, who's the director at the Symbiosis School for Culinary Arts. This is something that we've been doing for the last 4 days, and I'd like to thank all our audience who've appreciated the little tips that we've been giving you. Let's begin. As I said, today is the fourth and final day of the Internationalization of Higher Education Conference, which we are bringing to you in collaboration with the Association of Indian Universities and supported by the World Bank and Obrial Global. I'd like to invite Dr. Vidya to deliver her opening remarks.
So thank you, Anita. And it's nice to see Laura once again, though virtually, and we're missing you, Laura, here at Symbiosis. So we have so many of our international academic friends who couldn't travel this year, but fortunately they've supported us by, being present virtually at this conference. It's nice to have Laura again with EAIE, and before that with the Boston College. So Laura has been a long association of yours with all of us. And of course, Dr. Pankaj Mittal, another friend and a support of Symbiosis International University in all the conferences of internationalization of higher education. And I'm sure today she's going to speak on a new network that we envision in India. And Dr. Nicholas, who's again a senior director with African Center for Higher Education Internationalization, AFRIC, as it is called, from South Africa. So I welcome all of you. And I think today's topic that you're going to discuss is extremely relevant in this time of the pandemic, evolving networks and partnerships for supporting internationalization in these volatile times. And I think never ever before did we realize the importance of networks and collaborations, as we, ever thought of before. I mean, earlier on, collaborations were mainly limited to the mobility aspect of exchanges of students and faculty, and limited to these aspects than really anything more. But today you see that the whole world is discussing about collaborations, networks, interdependence. Even when vaccines are manufactured, they're not manufactured in a particular country. Even if they are, they're not used only for that country. And countries have come together to collaborate on several research projects related to this pandemic. So I believe this is an important session, and all my dear friends, and of course Nicholas from Obrial Global, about which I want to speak a little more, is also here. And Obrial Global has just started an India chapter that I chair, and we've started doing a lot of activities in India through this network. And one of course of this activity is what is supporting the IHE conference at Symbiosis International University. Dr. Pankaj, as I said, will discuss about the Indian Network for International Education. And Laura, you remember we've been discussing about this for quite some years. Almost 4 years ago, when Esther Bremer, the CEO of NAFSA, was at Symbiosis, and Mr. Prakash Zavadekar, who was then the education minister. In fact, we launched a virtual INE, I would say, the Indian Network for International Education. The minister clicked on the website also, so we had a website prepared. And then what a coincidence that Esther Bremer met Dr. Pankaj Mittal at another conference or meeting in Delhi, and she discussed about this network with her again. And it was actually Jane Knight, one of our mentors and idol, and for all of us as international academia dealing with internationalization of higher education, Jane is like a mother figure to all of us, and to me specifically. And Jane had mentioned about this network several years ago when she said that you cannot talk and discuss internationalization of higher education in any country unless you have a good network of not just your universities within the country, but even organizations and universities and networks outside of your country. And she was instrumental in building the African Network for International Education. And she kept pushing, all of us to say that there should be an Indian network. Dr. Pankaj will discuss more about it, at what stage it is, because we felt at Symbiosis that it cannot be a university alone, setting up a network like this, but it should be actually the Ministry of Education. If not, then at least the Association of Indian Universities, which has more than 800 member universities. And on the inaugural day, on the 7th, when the education minister was addressing all of us, I did make a mention very strongly about the minister and the ministry supporting this network, because we want this network, to see the light of the day. And there are several, international networks like the European Association of International Education, like the Obrial Global, like NAFSA, and several others who want to collaborate with and become members of this Indian network. So we'll discuss this at length. We will also learn a lot from, what it is to collaborate and what it is to network, not just with universities across the globe, but several other organizations that work in this space. Because it's not just about, academic exchange with faculty and student exchanges, but far more than that, to look at how networks and collaborations can really help human beings. How can it help societies and communities? And that's exactly, I think, is the topic for discussion. I hope, Laura, you take this discussion towards not just building a strong network, but really how do these networks and collaborations help the society and the community at large. So with these few words, I welcome all of you again at this wonderful conference. I hope and pray that the next year's conference is physical, and if not, at least blended. So we'll have some of our friends here on the Symbiosis International University campus. And I want to thank Dr. Pankaj Mittal once again for supporting us, as always, for the last 5 years through the collaboration of Association of Indian Universities. So over to you, Anita.
Dr. Vidya, I'm going to ask you to do something more, just for, for all our audience. Some of you might know, some of you may not. We conceived of our little contribution towards getting academics from across the world to talk with each other about internationalization of higher education. And something that we've been thinking about for a very long time has been the launch of an e-magazine. So conceived much before the lockdown, but delivered during the lockdown. Express Intelled has been the baby of the Symbiosis Center for European Studies, which is housed within the Symbiosis Center for International Education. Many of you have read, many of you have contributed to it. Our first edition was on advancing internationalization through blended learning. Our second edition was on sustainable development in international higher education. And our third one, which is opportune for this session, is on associations in internationalization of higher education, leading a change to transform higher education during the global pandemic. So I am going to request Dr. Vidya to release this third edition, Transformation in the Times of a Global Pandemic, Associations in Internationalization of Higher Education, Leading the Change. It is an e-magazine. Therefore, the link will be put in the chat box and all of you can access it. But since we're doing a virtual release, we've got a little printout for Dr. Vidya to hold up so that all of you can see it.
So I formally released this e-magazine, which I have a printout of. And I'm so happy that this e-magazine is now focused on transformation in the times of global pandemic, associations in internationalization of higher education, leading the change. I'd just like to add that, we've always been talking about, most of these associations being in the North, specifically in the Europe and the US. And I'm so happy that, with Obrial Global's presence, we now have a South-South-North association or a network, because we have started our talks with even countries in Latin America, which we never ever, envisioned that, someone sitting here in India would, even coordinate and collaborate with people in Latin America. And the discussions that we've had with the Latin American network, and specifically in Brazil, I realize that, globally, they're the same problems. And I think the pandemic has made us realize that the problems are the same. We just need to find solutions by working together. So over to you, Laura, and I'm sure this is going to be an extremely insightful session.
Laura is Associate Director, Knowledge Development and Research for the European Association for International Education. From 2012 to 2018, she was Associate Director and Assistant Professor of the practice at the Boston College Center for International Higher Education, where she is currently a research fellow. She is co-editor of the Journal of Studies in International Education and serves on the editorial advisory boards of many. She's currently a member of the advisory board for the European University of the Sea, a European Commission-supported European Universities initiative. A former US Foreign Service officer, she's a graduate. I don't know why I smiled when I said that. She's a graduate of Georgetown University, the SIT Graduate Institute, and Boston College, where she completed her doctoral thesis on internationalization in the universities of Spain. Very happy to have you, Dr. Laura. Over to you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Anita. To you also, Dr. Vidya, to Nidhi, a constant friend of the EAE. I'm extremely happy to be here personally and send very warm greetings on behalf of the EAE to be participating in this incredibly interesting event. I'm just glancing at the chat box and I'm seeing greetings from Cyprus, Nigeria, Amsterdam, Argentina, Kashmir. You have convened a highly international group and I think a very exciting topic. To wrap up, the work that you've been doing this week on your 5th International Higher Education Conference. Indeed, the reimagining internationalization, blended education as a catalyst is the overarching theme for your discussions, but we are kicking off track 6 in this stream of conversations, very specifically around evolving networks and partnerships for supporting internationalization in these volatile times. And I very much like that terminology of volatile times. It is very hard to know what's coming around the corner every day that we're waking up. I am delighted to be your chair for this session, and I'm extremely pleased to be in conversation on this topic today with 3 colleagues who bring a wealth of expertise and insight to the conversation that we'll be having today. I realize that there is ample information about their profiles in the conference information that you've received, but I would like to take a couple of moments just to point to the backgrounds and positions that our speakers hold, I think it offers a really interesting insight into the range of perspectives that they bring to this conversation and the combined expanse of knowledge that they offer us. So first, please allow me to introduce Dr. Pankaj Mittal, who is Secretary General of the Association of Indian Universities, AIU, also a co-sponsor of this event. And indeed, I understand only the second woman to hold this position of Secretary General at AIU in the 95 years of its existence. In her more than 30 years of service to the higher education sector, she has held senior positions at the University Grants Commission of India. She's also the National Commissioner for Rangers of Bharat Scouts and Guides, as well as a member of the General Assembly of the Indian Council for Cultural Relations and a former Fulbright Scholar. It is really wonderful to meet you in this space, Dr. Pankaj, and thank you for being with us. I'd also like to introduce Dr. Nico Yusta, who's currently the Senior Director for the African Center for Higher Education Internationalization, or AFRIC, based in South Africa. He is the past president of the International Education Association of South Africa, IHE, and the founding Senior Director, International Education of Nelson Mandela University, a position he held for just under 20 years. He's been involved in the conceptualization of the South African national policy on higher education internationalization, and is currently strategic advisor to SARUA, the Southern African Regional Universities Association, as well as internationalization advisor to the Vice Chancellor of the Botswana International University of Science and Technology. So deep roots in the South African and Southern African context, as well as significant global engagements as well. Really lovely to see you here, Nico. Wonderful. Our third panelist is, by happy coincidence, a second Nico, in this case, Dr. Nicholas Patrici, who has deep experience over the last 15 years coordinating ALPHUS, Erasmus Mundus, Action 1, 2, and 3, and Tempest projects, as well as leading EU cooperation and research projects and EU specialized actions. He's the former director of the Research Observatory of Globalization of the University of Barcelona. He's also worked extensively in the Middle East, serving as the director of the University of Barcelona and Middle East College's Smart Knowledge Alliance, based in Muscat, Oman. And he worked for the University of Barcelona Secretariat for the Arab-European Conferences on the Higher Education Process, together with the European University Association and the Association of Arab Universities. Nico, it's really great to meet you in this space as well. So if we could turn to our slides for a moment, I'd like to just give an overview of the agenda for this short hour that we have together. So I'd like to start with just a few short words to perhaps frame our thinking about why it is that we may find this particular focus on networks and partnerships to be especially compelling at this time. Dr. Vidya has already alluded to that, but I'd like to add to it a little bit if I may. We'll move from there into consideration of what collaboration means for India's current ambitions for internationalization, and I know those are significant. We will explore the question of networks and partnerships from a Southern African perspective, including consideration of some conceptual nuances in this space. And from there, I'd like to invite us to pull back even further to a broader global, or at least interregional perspective through the OBREAL global lens. And finally, we aim to leave time for questions and comments for the audience tuning in with us today. It's an extremely important part of this experience as well. So to the next slide that we've prepared, just a couple words of introduction. I wanted to inject a couple of ideas that spring from some thinking done by the EAE, my organization, on this topic. And in fact, the quote that you see is specifically from a piece that we wrote, that our executive director, Leonard Engel, wrote for the magazine that has been launched today, the Symbiosis Express International Ed e-publication. The sentiments that Leonard expresses here in this quote, I think really resonate quite strongly for me. This notion that the higher education community around the world continues to face major challenges, profound challenges. This is the defining characteristic of our time, and I think really needs to be front and center in our thinking about what it is we're doing now and what happens next. In addition, responding to these challenges absolutely requires us to move beyond business as usual. There is an urgency for higher education institutions and associations like mine and like yours to innovate. At the same time, in innovating, we as the EAE and all of our associations that are represented here today can't lose sight of our core function, our essence really, which is to foster meaningful connections for our members and for the wider community that relies on us. And again, Dr. Vidya mentioned that piece of the world around us, the communities we serve, the places where we sit. Those are all stakeholders, partners in the work that we do. And it's important for us to be there for those various stakeholders and to keep our focus on what we do for them clearly top of mind. In the piece that Leonard Engel has written for Symbiosis, he points to 3 quite important action lines that I'd like to highlight here, that associations, and by extension, I would say all kinds of networks and partnerships really need to attend to. The first is that we are called upon to help our members and constituents overcome isolation. This is a beautiful example here today of the ways that we are doing that, but thinking in creative ways, in smart ways, in inclusive ways about how we can overcome the isolation that has been imposed on us over the past year it remains extremely important. At the same time, we have to help our members and constituents continue to deal with uncertainty. The EIE did a podcast interview that came out this week with Robin Helms of the American Council on Education, in which she mentioned her American colleagues have been going from pivot to pivot to pivot over the last year. It's exhausting work. There's a lot of uncertainty, and we have to work together to be able to manage that and continue to evolve. And finally, our aspirations here as an association are not simply to survive and to hope that our members survive, but to really dig deeply into this question of thriving. We want to rise to this occasion, learn from it, move on beyond it, and be something bigger and better than we have been before. So when learning organizations like ours pool their knowledge and creativity and their commitment to improving the human condition, I think some very powerful and positive forces can be released. These powerful forces are certainly needed at this moment in time against the challenges that we face. I know our panelists have a lot to say about how internationalization and collaboration through international education is evolving in these really volatile, in this volatile period. And I know we're all looking forward to learning from those insights today. So without further ado, I'd like to pass the floor to Dr. Pankaj to give us a sense of these developments in the Indian context. And I believe we have a slide that can accompany her comments as well. Over to you, Dr. Pankaj.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much. And first of all, I would like to thank Symbiosis for holding this type of a conference year after year, and with so much of success that it's widely acclaimed conference all over the world. And as you said, that there are so many international participants, there are indeed, it is a truly international conference. So thanks to Symbiosis, and thanks for associating AIU with it, and thanks for inviting me for this particular session. And also my compliments are due to Laura. You won't, I mean, the audience won't realize that how much work she has done throughout this period, because she has been constantly writing mails to us that what will be your topic, what will be the sort of summary of the slides which should be there. And then those slides also she edited herself to make it more appealing and more sort of up to the mark. So thanks, Laura, for thanks for doing so much of work for the panel itself. Thank you very much. Now, coming to my presentation, I'm supposed to talk on these 3 issues: that what is the present status of internationalization in India, and then efforts made by Government of India, and the efforts made by AIU, which is my organization. So when we go to present status of internationalization of India, I think I'll go back to in ancient times, when Nalanda was established in, say, 4th century AD. At that time, India was very, very good in internationalization. In Nalanda, we had something like 2,000 teachers and 10,000 students who were studying, and those students were practically from all over the world. So that was the type of internationalization we were having in the ancient times. But today, when we talk of internationalization in India, the situation is not that bright, because right now, if you talk of international students, the number of students are about 46,000 in India, as against about 1 million who go abroad every year from India to the foreign countries for studying. So that situation does hit us. And then even in terms of foreign faculty, if you consider all the foreign faculty combined in, say, all the IITs, which are considered to be premium institutions in India, the total number is just 40 to 50. So all the IITs combined have not more than 40 to 50 foreign faculty with them. Of course, there are some private universities, including Symbiosis, Jindal Global Universities, and some universities which are having many foreign faculties. But I'm talking about the government institutions, the premier government institutions, which are having not more than 40 faculty members. And similarly, the collaborations are there. Of course, there are many collaborations. There are many MOUs between Indian universities and foreign universities. But if you talk of active MOUs, they are not that many, because many of the MOUs are sleeping MOUs. They have just been signed, but no work is happening in those MOUs, and collaborations are less. And the academic exchange, teacher exchange, joint degree programs were not allowed in India so far. Now we are beginning to start with the joint degree programs. So the scenario of internationalization is not very happy in India right now. Then that is why the government of India took very many steps, including the programs called Study in India, which was a targeted program to attract foreign students in India. That Study in India program was there. India also realized that many of the Indian universities are not in the, say, world ranking universities. So it was mentioned that we should be having some universities in India who have the potential to become, say, top 100 universities in the world. So those efforts were made. A scheme of institution of eminence was launched, under which the universities were given a lot of freedom and a lot of funding, especially for the public universities. A lot of funding was given so that these universities can become the centers of excellence and eventually become the universities in the world ranking. And one of the important features for these IOEs, which the country felt will be important for making them world top ranking universities, was internationalization. Therefore, for all these universities, it was felt that at least 20% of the faculty and 20% of the students should be international students. So a provision was made in the guidelines itself that 20% of the faculty and 20% of the students in these institutions of eminence should be from the foreign countries. So now a lot of emphasis is being given. Slowly, I think we will be moving ahead towards more of internationalization on our campuses. And to that effect, the National Education Policy, which has been released very recently in 2020, it was released. For the first time, a lot of emphasis has been given to internationalization of higher education. How? First, we have been talking for a long time about having the foreign campuses on the Indian soil. So, but the government of India was not allowing foreign universities to set up campuses in India. But for the first time, the policy itself says that the top 100 universities of the world, they will be allowed to establish campuses on the Indian soil. Now, that is again going to have a very good effect on the internationalization efforts of the government, because when the foreign universities are here, there will be a lot of opportunities for the collaborations between the Indian universities and foreign universities. The number of students who are going out from country to study in the foreign universities, they will be retained in the country, and there will be a lot of faculty exchange, student exchange between the Indian and the foreign campuses which are in India, on the Indian soil. So this is one thing which the policy has thought of. Second is that they are also saying that the Indian universities who have potential, they should go and set up their campuses abroad, especially in the areas where the ancient Indian knowledge system, or the, say, yoga or Ayurveda, such type of areas for which there is a lot of interest in the world. For those, our universities can go and set up their campuses abroad. Thirdly, again, for a very long time, people were talking about joint degrees. There was a lot of demand that joint degrees, dual degrees, twinning arrangements, they should be allowed. But again, the government of India was not allowing. But in the policy, it is mentioned that the government of India will allow joint degrees between Indian universities and the foreign universities, the dual degrees between the Indian universities and the foreign universities, and also the credit transfer between the Indian and the foreign universities will take place. Now, this has met with a lot of enthusiasm, especially from the foreign universities, and at many forums they are talking about this. Not only this, the regulation for joint degrees, dual degrees, which was on the UGC website, that has been responded to very positively, not only by the Indian side, but also by the foreign side. And they are also giving their comments on this regulation, that what all should be there. So therefore, the policy itself is promoting internationalization in a big way by sort of giving the enabling mechanisms, including even the setting up of foreign international offices in India, because we saw that there are universities which are having international students, but they did not have an international office. So the issues of the foreign students were not resolved at a single point. So this, although this may look like a small thing, but this was a major roadblock for the foreign students, because they could not get their grievances addressed at a single point. Therefore, international offices also, the policy has said that international offices should be established in the Indian universities, whosoever wants to host the foreign students. So now these are the efforts which are being made by the government of India. Now, thirdly, what are the efforts being made by the Association of Indian Universities? I'm going very fast because I'm aware of the time. The time is very less and the number of speakers are too many. So lastly, I'll tell that what are the efforts made by the Association of Indian Universities. See, one of the main works which is being done by AIU is equivalence of foreign degrees with the Indian degrees. Now, when we do equivalence, so far we were following the sort of a duration approach, means the degrees for which the duration is equal to the duration in the India. For example, if it is a 2-year master's degree and it is a 2 years master's degree in India, we'll give equivalence apart from certain other things, but duration was very, very important. But slowly we realized, and there were many representations from many universities, that the whole world is moving towards the credits, and in foreign countries there is a way of having a fast track degree in a lesser amount of time, but with the same number of credits. So now we are moving from the duration approach to the credit approach, and if the credits are equal, we are ready to give the equivalence of foreign degree. So that will again promote the sort of collaboration between Indian and foreign universities, as well as many of the Indian students will go to foreign universities and then come back after acquiring the degrees, because now the degree equivalence will not be a problem, and those students who have acquired degree from a foreign university can come and study again in India, further studies, or they can even get jobs in India. So that is one thing. Second is, many times we felt that when a foreign university wants to collaborate with an Indian university, they don't come to know that in a particular specific area which Indian university is good. They do have an overall sort of an impression based on the NAC rating, which is a assessment and accreditation body of AIU. There's one India ranking also, an NIRF, National Institute of Ranking Framework, which is India ranking framework. So from that, they are able to know the ranking of a university and the rating of the university. But in a particular subject area, which university is good, they are not able to know. So at AIU, we are making an AIU collaboration portal in which we are asking our universities. We have about 830 universities as our members. So we are asking our universities that tell us what you're good at, where you want to collaborate with the foreign universities, and put that in the AIU portal. So now if somebody wants to collaborate with an Indian university, they have to go to AIU portal and just indicate the subject area wherever they want to collaborate, and down will come the list of the universities who is good in that subject area, along with the credential in terms of, say, publications, faculty, infrastructure, facilities, equipment, everything. So that type of an effort we are putting up. And lastly, which is basically the theme of today's topic, we did understand, Dr. Vidya mentioned about the genesis of this idea of Indian Network of International Higher Education, that when we were talking to Esther Brimmer from NAFSA, we understood that although most of the countries have a network, a country which is as large as India, the second largest higher education system of the world, does not have a network of its own. So then and there, we decided that India should be having a network of its own and let AIU take a lead for this. And the reason was that, as I told you, that right now the internationalization scenario is not very good in India, but we really want to improve it. And then in India, we have something like 1,000 universities and 45,000 colleges. And very few universities like Symbiosis and maybe 20, 20, 30 more. They are good in internationalization. Rest are not good in internationalization, and rather many are there who want to do internationalization, but they don't know how to go about it, whom to contact, whom to collaborate with, how to contact, how to enter into partnerships. So they really don't know how to go about it, and there's no one who can do hand holding for them. So we are trying to make a network in which there will be a lot of information sharing, knowledge sharing, hand holding, so that the ones who want to do internationalization but don't know how to do it, they'll be getting a lot of support from sort of mutual support to each other. So that type of it is right now at the concept stage. We have got it approved from our governing council, and we will be sort of forming the network very shortly. So it is on the cards, it is in the pipeline, but very soon you will see an Indian network of international higher educators, which will be helping the universities to sort of help each other in promoting internationalization. So these are few things which we are trying to do, maybe with the guidance which we get in this webinar, or otherwise we'll try to do many more things. So with this, I will just like to end. Thank you very much. Thank you, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pankaj. I realize it is such a challenging assignment to be given to cover this extensive amount of ground in a short period of time, but you've really hit some of these very key points from the perspective of the government action, AIU's action, and a very interesting teaser about this future network that we should be anticipating for international education in India. I know we will have questions about those things. I'd like to suggest that we move on to our next speaker, Nico Yusta, and park questions for the end of our session, and I'm trying to keep good track of those. If you have questions or comments you'd like to share, please place these in the chat box, and we will attend to them as best we can in the period of time allowed to us. Nico, I was wondering if you might now come forward and give us some indications of what you're seeing on this topic from the Southern African and South African context.
Good morning, South African time to everybody. Thank you for inviting me. I need to thank Nico from Aubriel to introduce me to the space. As South Africa, we've had a long-standing relationship with India, and I personally have been to India a number of times and found it a fascinating space. But Dr. Anita, I need to say to you, I've always been quite perturbed by the fact that the Indian universities were not driving internationalization at the level they should, although you're one of the biggest exporters of students from a mobility point of view. So it's a pleasure for me to be part of this. And President, and I know we've got not enough time, Laura, so let me get to the point. There are three concepts that I just want to highlight in this discussion. Of networks. Anybody that has worked in higher education internationalization, we take networks and partnerships for granted, and that institutions should understand it. I've realized now lately that I'm working with Sarua and with Afrique that it's not the case. And therefore, I thought that just by introduction, stating what's the difference between a network and a partnership would perhaps be good. But before I start with this, with my good friend Hans de Wit, we actually were editors of a little book on higher education partnerships for the future that we published in a similar vein that you have a conference. We had a colloquium on internationalization at Nelson Mandela University. And the whole notion of partnerships, I want to introduce a little quote from the Oxford Martin Commission now for the future that they published in 2013. And the quote says, and we could actually, where they say our hyper-connected world, we could actually just say in our hyper-disturbed world that we are operating in at the moment, requires unprecedented collaboration. Reaching consensus on a path forward requires a deep understanding of how the one world affects the many and how the many worlds affect the one. This in turn necessitates a deeper awareness of local and regional cultures, perspectives, and identities, and how they are responding to each other in an era which cooperation is a prerequisite for progress. Now, that quote actually defines why partnerships and why networks. Now, what's the difference? I do think partnerships in the internationalization space, when we talk about partnerships, we think about individual institution to institution, or a consortia that's established by institutions, but that's more at the personal or at the institutional level. That's how we would normally see partnerships. I don't say that the network is not a partnership, but when we talk about networks, there are a number of types of networks, and I'll come back to it why I'm defining it. One of them are formal organizations, like the Association of Indian Universities, or your organization, Laura, the IHE, or SIU-AIU. Those are formal organizations that act as a network. And I think we must see all these organizations as networks. There are many of them. Then there are the informal networks that have a formal status. That means it's a membership driven. For instance, and I want, they are unknown network, I think to most, it's called the International Network of Universities. There's 13 members. They were created about 15 years ago to drive a specific theme in higher education. They're driving the notion of global citizenship. And so are there are many others. The Magna Carta organization, they are all different networks. The question to me is, if institutions, and this is where networks live on membership, if they don't have members, networks won't exist. And Laura, you know, and so does the NAFSA, the big ones, the two of you are the big ones, you know what this pandemic has done to the financial viability of the organizations. So we mustn't forget that networks, unlike partnerships, networks exist because there's members, and the members and the activities of the members drive the efficiency and effectiveness of the network. Now, let me just then ask the question, the second thing: what should influence the university's choice when joining networks? SIU-AIU, and I'm just going to for a minute talk about SIU-AIU, is a regional organization that was established because when the SADC, the SADC, the 16 countries that are part of the Southern African region, they promulgated a policy, if you want to call it that, on education and collaboration within the region, and said that should be driven by an organization. They didn't fund it. They allowed the organization to establish itself, but SIU-AIU needed to find members in SADC, and those members pay membership fees to make it work. So universities had the choice whether they want to join SIU-AIU or not. Simultaneously, we've got a continental organization called the Association of African Universities that was founded by the association, the African Union, and was the same basis. It's a membership-driven organization. Now, why do I hamper on that or focus on that? Universities have choices. And organizations like all these networks need to understand that unless you add value and unless you can clearly state to the institutions why you're there, they won't, well, they will join one year and not join the next year. Now, what's the relationship of that to internationalization? I don't think any of the networks will exist if international collaboration and the benefits they bring to international collaboration isn't one of the bases from where they operate. they bring different types of collaboration. They add different benefits, and they bring different introductions to certain topics that universities want to focus on, but still they all exist. Now, I've just done a bit of work. Countries, of course, countries have the same problem. When South Africa and India became part of, initially IPSA, India, Brazil, South Africa, and then we became part of BRICS, but IPSA still exists. So now the question is, do we join both, or do you make both work? And if you then start looking at all these regional organizations that countries belong to, the question is there enough capacity? And that comes to the last point. Is there enough capacity for you as an institution or as a country or as an individual to belong to numerous organizations, pay the fees, and get the benefits from that? Now, the critical is, I don't think it's always a simple choice, because sometimes it's status, and when you talk about rankings and so forth, who do you belong to sometimes counts, and that status allow others to connect with you, or there's a perceived place in the universe that you are now positioned in. The real issue is, how do we create capacity? And it was interesting when Dr. Mittal spoke about the policy in India, the future policy on internet, that there should be international offices. I think universities don't pay enough attention to creating the capacity to manage the networks they belong to. You've heard numerous times, and I know when I was still a senior running internationalization of the university, I know many times vice chancellors say to me, so what benefits are there for us? The benefit 99% of the time is not what the organization does to you, but how you use the opportunities that is available within the networks to enhance your internationalization and your positioning as a university. And that's I've got, I think, another minute or two, Laura, but that's the conclusion that I want to make, that internationalization and networks and partnerships go hand in hand with capacity. And the latest definition, not the J. Knight one, the one that De Wit and others developed for the European Union report, where the one word that they introduced is intentional. So the intentionality of internationalization practices within networks will only happen if you create capacity for universities to be active. Now, the conclusion is, Laura and colleagues, that in this really disrupted environment, I do believe that we need to rethink our participation in and active participation in networks. I think networks will actually create shortcuts to certain of the things that we in the past couldn't do. Aubriel is that neutral space where South-South-North collaboration can happen without the one dominating the other. And we need to create spaces and make these spaces really active spaces in the future if we really want partnerships to work. And my last word, which we actually in this book of ours on partnership of the future, unless it's values driven, partnerships and networks will slowly move into becoming a commercial exercise or whatever it is. And the African saying, which I know exists in many other places in the world in a different format, the Ubuntu, I am because of you. I think that is what networks and partnerships should be defined on. When I join a partnership or a network, it shouldn't only be what do I get out of it. It is what do I contribute to actually contribute to the good of the broader membership and of the world. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Nico, so very much. So in 5 words, I'm taking away intentionality, capacity, efficiency. You talked about these shortcuts, added value. What are we getting out of it based on this participation in networks, but also values driven. So some very interesting and compelling big ideas there. Thank you very much for that. Over now, please, to our next slide and to our next speaker, Nico Patrici, and some words from Volatile Global's perspective on this topic.
Thank you. Now it works. Thank you very much, Laura. Thank you very much, Symbiosis University and Dr. Vidya, in particular, also Anita, Nidhi, and Bama, and all the team for the kind invitation to Volatile to support this conference. We feel very, very, very proud of doing so. I'm very honored as well to try to humbly support India in this journey of internationalization. To go to the point, because time is short, I would like to start from where Nico Yusta left it. Nico mentioned a couple of things that they are useful for my introduction. Nico mentioned the differences between, or more or less the difference between network and partnership. And then you raise the question how you use opportunities. Well, Volatile Global started from there. It started from understanding that a network or being a network was not enough, and we tried to establish ourselves as an association of partners that are looking at the evolving situation in the world and evolving situation in associations and in the university global landscape, more from the side of the opportunity rather than from the side of the challenges. Challenges are plenty, but the opportunities that this situation is opening are enormous, and we are trying to take these opportunities forward. Why? Because we do believe, or we have believed for a long, long time, that internationalization is an attitude, or at least is a perspective, a perspective that individuals have, that institutions have, and that associations have. But it's a perspective and an attitude that should be linked also to a partnership commitment to influence public policy in order to make these, as you mentioned, Nico, opportunities, to make them happen or being transformed in the implementation of public policies that, or influence in the design, at least, of the public policies that should have an impact in the local scope. So Volatile Global is trying to move from the global to the local and from the local to the global as an association of partners. And this is reflected also in the governance of our association. We are based in Spain by chance. We could be based in the virtual space as well. We have partners and members in Europe, but we are organized through chapters that are operating or that are thinking projects, very concrete projects in different parts of the world, and that they are acting together. Chapters in India, the India chapter is chaired by Dr. Vidya by Symbiosis University, but also chapters in Africa, in South America, in Central America, in the Caribbean, and in Europe. And our goal and mission is to promote internationalization from the perspective of the South-South-North cooperation. This is extremely interesting exercise to do. We thought at the beginning that it was going to be easier than it is, but we are living with a lot of unknowns and a lack of, let me be very clear and cruel here, there is an absolute lack of knowing each other from the perspective of the South. And we are trying to transform this. We are trying to create spaces where institutions from the South can meet and cooperate and generate opportunities and share capacities. And from there, discuss and participate of activities with institutions and our members also from the North. We are trying to do this because we do believe that internationalization has an impact, and an impact that cannot or should not be isolated in the group of individuals and institutions that normally and traditionally have been cooperating at the international arena, but that there are other actors and regions that should that have a lot to say and a lot of experiences and capacities to share. In that sense, we are trying to promote very, very concrete projects based on national and regional priorities. And we are trying to do this also by building bridges between regions in a way that whatever experience is available in Brazil can influence and have an impact in India, and whatever experience and projects and national priorities are in India can have and influence the priorities of Brazil. Building this bridge is a very humble task that we are mandated by our members to do, but very, 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 very important for the internationalization scope of universities and associations for the future. So to conclude, I think that the internationalization is giving us an opportunity, or the global situation is giving an opportunity for us to look at internationalization from a different perspective, from wherever we are standing in the internationalization arena. If we are individuals that belongs to a network or to any network, we probably need to start looking at internationalization as a broader opportunity for us. If we belong to, if we are an institution, as you, Nico, were mentioning, we need to start thinking how to use opportunities beyond the obvious scenario. The pandemic opened, once again, a lot of opportunities for non-traditional internationalized institutions to cooperate, and not only to generate mobility, but also, for example, we are working in projects on skill development in India, which is a priority in India, and we are trying to internationalize curricula together with universities from India, from Sweden, and from Latin America. We are doing the same in Latin America on digitalization. Just to give an example, now some Latin American institutions are looking at NPTL, which is probably most important online learning platform in India that they didn't know, and now they are connecting with NPTL management and see how they can cooperate. So to conclude, for L'Oréal Global, the pandemic and the situation has been an enormous opportunity that we are trying to concretize in our association, but not only from a point of view or from a pure rhetoric point of view, but also to generate, Nico mentioned, L'Oréal Global should be a neutral space. This is what we are trying to do, but it should be a neutral space run by its members, and its members should represent the complexity and plurality of the regions of the world that compose our association. Thank you very much, Laura. I hope I have covered all the 3 points in less than 10 minutes.
You've done so remarkably. Thank you so much, Nico. And again, apologies to try and ask you to bring so much to bear in such a short period of time. We have about 5 minutes for some conversation. I'm told we're ending right on time, so I'm going to dive right into that. There is a question that surfaced, very simply put as, is internationalization of higher education possible without standardization of higher education? There may be some questions we have about what this person means by standardization of higher education exactly, but I thought I might pitch this to Nico Patrici. I mean, you've just said how important it is to think about the nuances, the complexities, the differentiation that we might see across different national contexts or regional contexts, and honor that. But at the same time, how do we find common ground then in terms of collaborating and engaging with one another? Is there something to be said for some processes of standardization or alignment that need to happen in order for those to be meaningful collaborations and engagements?
The question is very interesting, and there is no one answer that I can give you, Laura. Probably it's too complex. I do not. Let me try to answer this from my personal perspective now. I was born in Argentina, so I cannot avoid being an Argentinian. I have been living in Europe for the last 20 years. I lived also in the GCC. I am married with a German national. I have a daughter that speaks a weird mix between Spanish and German and Catalan. So it's impossible to standardize any international relation in this sense. It's absolutely doesn't make any sense. Things should be understood in context. And what matters is what the context can teach the other context. Let me put an example that I always discuss with Nico Yusta. I am this Argentine, and Nico is that South African. We share a lot of things, but we don't know each other. How we can produce joint programs, for example, in higher education, or joint approaches to content that reflect the complementary approaches that the South Africans can bring to Argentina and that Argentina can bring to South Africa in topics of common interest. To put once again the question of South Africa, wine production, for example, agriculture. These are things that are extremely relevant for the development of South Africa and Argentina. But when you see the amount of international cooperation in the academic field between Argentina and South Africa, is zero. So can this be standardized? Probably no. What it needs to be is to be understood in its plurality and complexity. And the only way to do this is to set up the table, to have South African institutions and Argentine institutions talking and trying to find a common language. And the same can be said between India and Brazil, or India and Argentina, or India and Colombia, or India and Mexico, or the Netherlands and Argentina. It is the same. The problem is, in my opinion, that internationalization has been traditionally seen from a very standardized perspective. And this is exactly what we need to try to break down, to understand the things in its own complex grammatical approach, if I may say.
So I look at the clock and I'm heartbroken, because if we go down the road with another question, I fear we will hit the end of our hour. I would like to just follow up, though, to say that what you said on the global stage also seems to be an issue of interest, even at the national level. We have questions that have come up in the chat box about the variation across the Indian higher education context and what that means for internationalization efforts in just one national context. So I think that will be a very interesting conversation for us to watch as India moves forward with its internationalization objectives. At this point then, looking at the clock, I would like to thank all of you so much for all that you brought to this conversation and shared with us today. And of course, on our behalf, to thank our hosts at Symbiosis International University, as well as the Association of International Universities and Obrail Global, for letting us be with you today. I'll conclude there and turn this back to Anita, if that would be appropriate.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you all the experts. I've realized that 1 hour is really, really short when you're learning so much, and the chat box is providing us so much food for thought. So sometime later, hopefully, this conversation will continue, but we all have things that we can go back and think about. And I'm glad that the chat box is actually allowing people to share their emails, and I know that some of them are going to get together to discuss how India is going to respond, and there's so much that's happening there. So thank you so much. We will now, before the conclusion of this session, have a quick, if I'm not mistaken, Nidhi, we have a quick health tip before we end this. And then we will be back after that sharp at 5:15. One of the highlights of last year's IHE was the student participation in the student session. And this time we have a student session too, completely managed by the students. And that, I think it's perfect that we're ending with that session, hearing what students have to say about what they need from the rest of us to thrive in this very volatile world.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all the delegates across the continents. It is indeed my pleasure to present on good nursing care is the cornerstone of effective management of COVID-19. All of us would have become sick one part of our life. And what treatment did we get? Treatment in the hospital is different, treatment from doctors is different. but we would have been pampered by our own mother, father, or grandparents. That's exactly nursing care is. And all of us have an image of nurse. Nurse is a person who wears a cap or white dress or carries a syringe or something like that. But let me tell you, a nurse is a person. I'll give you the acronym. Nurse is a person who the N stands for name empathy. U stands for understands emotions. R stands for respect the clients. S stands for support the clients, and E stands for explore the ways and means to care the clients. Now, why do I bring this acronym here today? COVID-19 is no exception, and we need nursing care, and it is bad in the sense that the person who is near us in the family has to give this care. Only very few are hospitalized and others are in the house, and the person who is there, a caregiver, will become a nurse who will operate at home. So nursing care becomes a cornerstone for the effective management for those who are at home and getting the care for COVID-19. So what should the person who is near and dear should do for the COVID-19 patient? The patient should be kept in a place or a room which has got a well ventilated situation and avoiding any contact with others. And there should be a regular monitoring of temperature, pulse, oxygen saturation by pulse oximeter. Good nutrition, I don't need to say about this good nutrition because the initial part of the conference, the culinary arts director had brought in a very wonderful video on this good nutrition. But however, let me remark that the grandma's pouch of nutrition is a very, very handy one for the COVID-19, be it be a herbal decoction or be it be a bland diet of porridge or a non-spicy diet will definitely improve the health of the patient with COVID-19. Holistic nursing. There are 5 dimensions to this holistic nursing. Nursing is the profession which has been practicing this holistic nursing from the thoughts of Florence Nightingale, who is a pioneer of modern nursing. The 5 dimensions is physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental and social dimension. When I say spiritual, it depends on the religion that you practice or whatever you do. Maybe a little bit of chanting for the person, little bit of doing some ritual at home, just to make the person mentally and emotionally active. That gives lot of input to the treatment that is being given by the doctors, and definitely the management of COVID will be better, so that the patient doesn't go into depression and doesn't go mood off because of the disease, because the patient is totally locked inside the house, and so the caregiver. In case of medical emergency, contacting your healthcare provider. Now the telenursing is very, very active, and so we have to look into the telenursing and get the tips from the nurses. Everyone says about SMS in COVID-19, that is social distancing, mask and sanitization. Let me tweak it and say SNS. Now, what is SNS? Safe Nursing Services. When we look into a medical healthcare facility, we have the registered nurses, licensed nurses who are eligible to practice, who knows the infection control practices, and such a hospital will definitely help the patient who is getting admitted, and so that we can reduce the mortality and the morbidity, the duration of the morbidity for the patient. So SNS will be the mantra of today, and that safe nursing services can be catered to the people who are at home also when they are at home quarantine. So we would like to, can we move on to the next slide, please? I would like to salute all the corona warriors who have been the angels fighting this to keep people alive and helping all who are in crisis. Let us all spread this message of being warriors and angels at our own little way, so that the COVID-19 patients come out and we, all of us, are safe and healthy in the years to come. At the outset, I would like to place my sincere thanks to our beloved Dean, Dr. Rajiv Ervedikar sir, and the top management of Symbiosis for giving me this wonderful platform to share few thoughts about good nursing care. Thank you.